Now, Newsnight on BBC Two with Jeremy Paxman in Manchester and Emily Maitlis in London.
And I'm all in favour of apprenticeships. But let me tell you, this is no time for a novice.
That was his best joke. In fact, it was almost his only one. For the rest, he admitted mistakes, claimed experience, and promised more public spending. Keep hold of nurse for fear of something worse. First, his wife told us what a good job he's doing.
Every day I see him motivated to work for the best interests of people all around the country.
Then he told us himself and promised more of the same.
I didn't come into politics to be a celebrity or thinking I would always be popular. Perhaps that's just as well.
The one person who should know the mood of the party is the Chief Whip, Jeff Hoon. Does he think Brown's done enough?
I'll be playing another round of Place That Face. How is Gordon Brown rated compared with other Labour leaders?
In Washington, $700 billion is suddenly sounding like a lot of money. Will the bad debt bailout get the go-ahead?
It is not just our economy that is at risk, but our Constitution as well.
And at the UN, Iran's President Ahmadinejad says the American empire is nearing the end of the road.
Good evening. They said he had to make the speech of his lifetime if he was going to snuff out dissent in his party. He made what was generally here reckoned to be a much better speech than most of his previous ones. I am who I am. This is what I believe. There's work to do was the rough thrust of it. It seemed to please the hall here. In that sense, it was enough, for now at least. First tonight, David Grossman reports.
You all got your badges, ladies?
Yes.
Yeah, we knew we'd have that.
John Prescott working the crowd, geeing up the queue for Gordon Brown's speech, making sure they're in the right optimistic frame of mind. Say what you like about the former Deputy Prime Minister, but he knows how to touch the Labour Party's heart.
Show these press that we know what we want, we don't need them to tell us.
Inside the hall, Gordon Brown, though, had turned to a very different warm-up act. His wife, Sarah, making her debut as a Labour platform speaker.
I remember the warm welcome you gave me and Gordon at conference after our wedding. And I'm so proud that every day I see him motivated to work for the best interests of people all around the country.
And then the Prime Minister himself took the stage. Mr. Brown is, it seems, having to reapply for his own job at the moment. And straight away, he addressed that question.
Now let's come straight to the point. I want to talk with you today about who I am, what I believe, what I'm determined to lead this party and this great country to achieve.
Sometimes the Prime Minister is advised that it would be easier to tell us who he is if he showed us his softer side. Show us Gordon Brown, the family man.
My answer is simple. My children aren't props, they're people.
A dig perhaps at David Cameron, and there would be much more of that to come. But first, Mr. Brown admitted to having got some things wrong, notably scrapping the 10p rate of income tax.
So what happened with 10 pence? It stung me because it really hurt that suddenly people felt I wasn't on the side of people on middle and modest incomes. Because on the side of hard-working families is the only place I've ever wanted to be.
The political headline of Mr. Brown's speech was a new settlement. That's new rules for the financial sector. Those who argued for what he called the dogma of unbridled free markets, Mr. Brown said, had been proved wrong. There'd be new rights for parents and patients, free prescriptions for cancer sufferers. In short, Mr. Brown said they were delivering the kind of change that only Labour was capable of.
We're changing the world the only way it can really ever change. One life, one family, one hope at a time. That's the real power of Labour to change lives.
Mr Brown accused the Conservatives of only talking about fairness because they thought it would win them votes. Labour, in contrast, he said, were true believers.
Not because it makes good sound bites, not because it gives good photo opportunities, not because it makes for good PR. No, we do it because fairness is in our DNA.
There is, of course, one pretty reliable way of getting Labour delegates to their feet: beat up on the Conservatives.
Just think where our country would be if we'd listened to them. No paternity leave, no New Deal, no Bank of England independence, no Sure Start, no devolution, no civil partnerships, no minimum wage, no investment in the NHS, no new nurses, no new police, no new schools. So let's hear no more from the Conservatives. We did fix the roof while the sun was shining.
They like that attack on the party and this attack on the party's leader.
And I'm all in favour of apprenticeships. But let me tell you, this is no time for a novice.
The text clearly referred to David Cameron, but did the subtext include another David, Miliband? The Prime Minister told his audience that all the attacks on him, the bad headlines for his party, didn't matter because Labour are helping people. And with tough times on the way, he said, the party would be needed more than ever.
It's the mission of our times, the fair society, the cause that drives us on. And we will win, not for the sake of our party. Together we will win for the sake of our country. Thank you very much.
The applause in Manchester was warm and genuine, but it is of course those outside the conference hall who need reaching if Labour is to win again. The millions of voters who appear to have turned their backs on a government that they think has been too long in power.
For me, the important thing was actually the sense of just a little bit taking the fight out of the Tories. What has kind of disturbed me a little bit in the last few months is Conservative building up this opinion poll lead, frankly without doing anything to deserve it, without putting forward any positive proposals, any positive agenda. And I think that there were some important dividing lines being laid down there. And I mean, obviously he was always going to get a good reception, and I thought it was a good speech, and he deserved that reception. But these speeches, in the end, it's not about the reaction on the day, it's what happens with them in terms of their as a strategic building blocks, if you like.
But what impact will this speech have on those who want Gordon Brown to stand down? In the past, John Hutton's been one of several cabinet ministers who've declined to criticise those MPs who've called for a leadership contest. Today, though, he was more robust in his support for the Prime Minister.
People outside the government, people in the party, people will say what they want to say, but those of us who have responsibility, those who are in the government, who are supporting Gordon Brown and the work that he's doing, our job, I think, is clear. It's to get behind him, it is to support him, and to have no distractions from the job that we've got. It's a big job of convincing the country about what we're doing, building support for a fourth term, and that's what I'm going to be focused on, and absolutely nothing else.
As he left the conference hall, Gordon Brown knew he'd definitely got one job done today. His speech was well received, but no one thinks that this on its own is enough to take his leadership off the critical list. The big question is how well it's received beyond Manchester. Are those who can't wait to see the sunset of New Labour ready to contemplate a new dawn?
Well, that was David Grossman. With us now, our political editor, Michael Crick. What did you think of the speech?
Well, I think it was pretty good, better than I expected. 7.5 out of 10, I'd say. But it wasn't challenging or revolutionary, say, in the style of Gaitskell's Fight, Fight, Fight Again, or Kinnock on Militant, or Blair on Clause 4. Clearly there was a new style of Brown's speech here. He'd done a lot of work on it, despite having to deal with the financial crisis of the last few days. He was pausing better, the pace was better, it was very humorous, and it was very personalised, of course, and that was a positive. The masterstroke, I thought, was Sarah Brown at the beginning, brilliantly done, very competent, very the right length, the right tone. And that could have gone disastrously wrong, of course, especially as, I mean, she told me only in the last few minutes that it was only actually agreed that she would do it yesterday.
Many people would see it was a sign of desperation. You field your wife, and then in the speech say, and I won't make my children props in some sort of publicity campaign.
Indeed, a hostage to the future, of course. And it would be interesting to see what role Sarah Brown plays from now on in the Brown leadership.
So do you reckon he's in place till the next election?
Well, no, I think his position is still very, very uncertain between now and the next election. The rebels tonight have been silent. One of Tony Blair's former advisors said to me, it was a good speech, but the trouble was he should have made it a year ago. There are a lot of obstacles over the next few weeks. You've got the pre-budget report, the Glen Rothis by-election, MPs going back to Westminster. And although this will have done a lot, I think, to reassure and cheer up the party, the question is what effect will it have on the opinion polls, which Alistair Campbell was raising there, and will it make an impact on that 20-plus lead the Conservatives had? I suspect that will be a much trickier thing, and of course it's that ultimately feeds the fear amongst MPs that they will lose their seats.
Michael, thank you. Well, just before we interview the Chief Whip, Jeff Hoon, David Grossman has an update from outside the conference hall here. David, what is it?
Yeah, Labour delegates, Jeremy, clearly enjoying their last night of the conference, but speculation now turns on to the next job that Gordon Brown may have to do, which is to reshuffle his cabinet. Now, the latest intelligence that Newsnight has from inside Number 10 is that there will be a reshuffle and it will happen next Friday. That is a small window between the Conservative conference next week and Parliament coming back. Now, as to who will be involved in this reshuffle, well, I have to say the latest intelligence that we are getting is not good news for the man that you are about to interview, Jeff Hoon, the Chief Whip. He has appeared rather sidelined at Westminster in recent weeks. The job of corralling MPs who may be minded to call for a leadership contest has seemed to go to his deputy, Nick Brown, who's always been far closer to Gordon Brown. In terms of the other name that will leave the cabinet, we understand Ruth Kelly, the Transport Secretary. In her case, it appears that she wants to leave government.
Any word on who might go into the cabinet then, David?
Well, the names that we are getting from inside Number 10, the latest news that comes from inside Number 10, from sources inside Number 10, is not a big surprise. Two names, Liam Byrne, he is, of course, a Home Office Minister, and Jim Murphy, the Europe Minister. Both of them seem to be very able, both of them tipped for cabinet positions. The big unanswered question that is still being asked inside Number 10 is what to do about Alistair Darling, the Chancellor, whether to keep him where he is or to move him to signal a new start on the economy.
David, thank you very much. Well, Jeff Hoon, the Chief Whip, joins me now. You couldn't hear all of what David Grossman was saying, but I think you know. Do you like Brussels?
I spent 10 years as a member of the European Parliament, but I, of course, left Brussels when I had the opportunity and privilege of standing for the House of Commons.
Would you like to go back?
I chose at that time to, fortunately, to come back to the United Kingdom.
If the Prime Minister asked you to go and become a European Commissioner, how would you think?
I'd have to weigh that up at the time, but clearly that's a matter for the Prime Minister. I think that...
He hasn't discussed it with you?
I think it's important that we move away from reshuffle speculation at this stage. We've just had a very powerful, very authoritative speech from the Prime Minister.
We'll come to the speech in just a second, but just to be clear, have you discussed this with the Prime Minister going to Brussels?
I have lots of conversations with the Prime Minister about a whole range of issues.
Have you discussed this particular question of whether you should go and be the new European Commissioner?
I have not had a discussion specifically relevant to me. Clearly, the decision as to who should be the next European Commissioner is a matter that the Prime Minister will have to decide.
Absolutely, and therefore you have something of a vested interest in him staying as leader, I guess.
I don't accept that for a moment. What actually would be by far the best solution, if it is possible, would be for Peter Mandelson to remain in post. And I've certainly had discussions along those lines.
Can you give us an estimate after today's speech then, your view as Chief Whip? How many dissident MPs are there now left in the party, having heard what the Prime Minister had to say today?
Well, I've been clear that there were only a handful. Those handful have said what they believed they had to say. I think the Prime Minister today gave a very powerful response to those criticisms. I think he demonstrated that he's the right man for the job at this time, but equally the right man to lead us into the next general election.
Have you spoken to any of this handful of discontents?
Oh, of course, yes, I spoke.
And were they persuaded by the speech?
I haven't spoken to them since the speech, but I've certainly heard their views. I had a long conversation with Siobhan McDonough before she resigned. She was a member of my team in the Whip's office, so certainly I was well aware of the views of virtually all of those people who have spoken out.
But you judge that this speech will have quieted the party?
I'm absolutely clear in my own mind. The reception in the hall, the reception amongst those MPs that I have spoken to, I think this was a very, very powerful statement of why Gordon Brown should be the Prime Minister into the next general election and indeed beyond.
You're a lawyer by background. As a lawyer, can you explain to us what the Prime Minister means when he talks about legislating to end child poverty? What would such a law be?
I think it's important that we look at the various different ways in which we can eliminate child poverty. There are...
Legislating?
Well, there are various measures that could be taken to put, for example, legislative responsibility on those authorities responsible for dealing with housing, for example, to ensure that those who are below a certain level do receive appropriate assistance. So there are legislative mechanisms that can play a part in the overall process.
When you look at what the Prime Minister said, though, I mean, he trotted out all sorts of achievements he said had been accomplished during the last 10 years. Well, of course, any government in 10 years would have been bound to have done something. But surely the most astonishing thing that he said in that speech was that it was more important now to elect a Labour government than it was in 1997. That's a staggering indictment, isn't it?
What he was talking about was the importance of Labour, with its experience in government, facing very difficult economic circumstances, a country where people are clearly worried about their homes, their jobs, energy prices. What he was really saying is that after 10 years in government, we have the experience, we've been through some significant difficulties, and it's better to rely on his experience, our experience in government, rather than turn to the very untried and untested opposition.
But more important now than in 1997?
He was referring to those circumstances. In 1997, we were not faced with a global financial crisis. We were not faced with dramatic rises in commodity prices. And what he's really saying is, look, these are a particular and difficult set of circumstances. He's perhaps too modest to say so, but I can say it on his behalf. He's a man who's been Chancellor of the Exchequer for 10 years. He's been in the Treasury for that period of time. I believe he has the particular qualities to take us through these particular difficulties.
He says he wants to achieve a new settlement, as he put it. How will we know when this settlement is settled?
What he's talking about are the kinds of measures that are necessary, first of all, to deal with that financial crisis. I'm responsible for the business of the House. In a few weeks' time, we will bring forward a banking bill that will contain within it further protections for depositors.
What, then his job is done when there's a new banking bill? He's not talking about that at all. He's talking about a wholesale reconstruction.
He's talking about the way in which we transform society. He's talked about the way in which over 10 years we have used the benefit of economic success to deliver better public services, better healthcare, better education. What he's talking about is how we entrench that in our society. Because
how will we know when that point has been reached and he can shuffle off into retirement?
Well, I think actually what he was talking about, and this is quite important, is that when we have an opposition that has scarcely sketched out its policies, that has given us a very light view of what a Conservative government might involve, what he's wanting to achieve, Tony Blair talked in very similar language, is entrenching our commitment to public service, our commitment to equality, to fairness, to opportunity for all, in a way that a future Conservative government that doesn't share those values, that doesn't share that approach, could not reverse. That's the settlement he's talking about.
Jeff Hoon, thank you very much. Well, we'll be back a little later in the programme, but for the moment, over to you in London.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. To Washington now, and the Bush administration is urgently pressing Congress to move quickly on a £700 billion bailout of the financial industry. But Congress, inconveniently for Bush, is taking its time. Today, the architects of the plan, Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke, came under a grilling from Congress. Legislators on both sides accused them of a plan that was hastily thought out and contained no real definition of bad debt anyway. And whilst Washington wrangled, markets fell. Here's our economics editor, Paul Mason.
Across our great nation, families are gathering around their kitchen table each night asking how they will afford groceries and gasoline. Foreclosures are forcing 9,800 families from their homes each and every day in our country. American taxpayers are angry.
For a plan that is supposed to save the world, the Paulson plan gained a poor reception.
After reading this proposal, I can only conclude that it is not just our economy that is at risk, but our Constitution as well.
Each plan has been more costly, more risky, and less aligned with the principles of our country's free market economy than the last. I'm disappointed to say that this latest plan puts all the rest of them to shame.
It is a financial socialism, and it's un-American.
The plan involves using $700 billion of taxpayers' money to buy bad mortgage debts off the banks. That's the total pot. But what should they pay for each individual bad debt? If they were sold on the market, how much would they be worth?
Because of the complexity of these securities and the serious uncertainties about the economy and the housing market, there is no active market for many of these securities.
That means the state's paying above the market price, not hard when the price is probably zero. The pledge to do the $700 billion bailout is a golden opportunity for politicians who want to rein in the power of the banks. They now want the government to take a stake in any bank that's bailed out, and they want hands-on oversight. But to free marketeers, this is an outrage. For them, the cure is worse than the disease.
We need to go back immediately to prudent lending. And then in terms of fixing this, it's going to be long and it's going to be difficult, and we're going to have a sustained recession in the United States. And that's just the way it is because of these bad lending practices. So now we have to take our medicine. And Secretary Hank Paulson is dangling this carrot that, well, you don't have to take your medicine if you trust me. It's outrageous.
As the senators quibbled, the markets slid. The S&P 500 down 1.5%, the FTSE down nearly 2%, both back roughly where they closed the day Lehman went bust. Here are the pitfalls of the bailout. 1, to fund this and other bailouts, the USA will probably have to borrow in excess of $1 trillion this year. 2, $700 billion might not be enough because there are a whole bunch of other companies just lining up to be bailed out. 3, in the long term, this will probably hammer the value of the dollar. On top of that, there's much, much more bad debt in the system. The analysis website RGE Monitor estimates there's $10 trillion in the so-called shadow banking system at risk. The market for credit default swaps, where one bank takes an accumulator bet on the failure of another, was said today to be $58 trillion.
The $58 trillion notional market in credit default swaps, to which several of you have referred in your opening comments, that is double the amount that was outstanding in 2006, is regulated by absolutely no one. Neither the SEC nor any regulator has authority over the CDS market, even to require minimum disclosure to the market.
In the part of the US economy where they still count dollars in ones, not trillions, that means fewer mortgages, fewer credit cards and business overdrafts. Recession is looming. Critics of the plan say, let it.
This has been a very ugly period in our financial history, but to bail people out is simply the wrong way to go about trying to solve this mess. And to use threats of financial Armageddon if you don't do it our way, when it was their way that got us into this mess in the first place, is just reasoning that we should not accept.
American finance is at a mind-bending moment. Ben Bernanke, chair of the Fed, has built an academic career on the thesis that the finance system, as constructed, is the source of all dynamism. Only last year, this is what he had to say. In the United States, a deep and liquid financial system has promoted growth by effectively allocating capital and has increased economic resilience by increasing our ability to share and diversify risks both domestically and globally. And this is what the man sitting next to him today thinks about that system now.
After about several months on the job, I was shocked, absolutely shocked, to find it wasn't deregulation or too much regulation or too little regulation. It was a just flawed regulatory structure. It was built for a different model, for a different financial system. The financial system changed. The regulatory system didn't change.
To sort it out, they will have to take $2,300 for every man, woman and child in America and use it to buy financial junk.
Paul Mason there. Well, joining me now from Capitol Hill, Congressman Scott Garrett, who opposes the bailout, and Professor Barry Eichengreen, a former IMF economist, now at the University of California at Berkeley, and an expert on the Great Depression. Professor Eichengreen, is it possible to imagine any bailout that doesn't actually involve using taxpayers' money?
At this late stage in the financial crisis, I find it impossible to imagine not using taxpayer money. I find it impossible to imagine that we will ultimately be able to stay within the $700 billion price tag.
Given that, Congressman, isn't it a luxury at this point to oppose something that could be a lifeline to the entire financial industry?
Well, I guess that really remains to be the question here, whether this is the lifeline. That question has been put to the administration. If we do all this today, or this week, if you will this actually get us through it? And they're really not able to give us that answer. And so when the figure is thrown around of $700 billion, a lot of us have concerns whether that $700 billion will grow to $1 trillion and then go on from there. And that's why it's just one of the questions that we have for the administration.
Well, let me clarify that. If there were checks and balances in place, if there was a limit, if there was this transparency and the oversight that everyone's asking for, would you support any bailout of this kind?
Well, we would still want, before we say yes or no on this, to have some more discussion on it and some more information. For example, if you were going to open it up to $700 billion, $1 trillion, or even more, can they give us some assurances or some implication, what the implications would be on the rest of the economy? I'm concerned, for example, that the most unjust tax of all, which is inflation, would lift its head up after this, because even though we'll be in a depressed economy right now for a short period of time, right after that we would see hyperinflation follow for the next several years until production actually caught up with where the economy is. And it's those factors that I think we still need to have answered before we put taxpayers' dollars at risk in a plan that there aren't these assurances on.
Barry Eichengreen, people are using very apocalyptic language about this, but the truth is there are just too many unknowns, aren't there? The inflation question is one. The other question is, what do you decide? At what point do you decide what is bad debt? Are we talking 700 billion, 1 trillion, 3 trillion? I mean, the numbers are phenomenal, aren't they?
And the numbers are amazing.
Sorry, I'm just putting that point to Professor Eichengreen for a second.
Sure.
The numbers are phenomenal, and I think this whole situation is unprecedented in our lifetimes. The financial house is on fire, and I think we have no choice at this point but send in the fire brigade. The congressman has a point. We want them to be properly equipped. We want them to have an appropriate plan before they enter the burning building. But we have a couple of days to sort this out now. I wouldn't want to go into the weekend without a plan.
Congressman Scott Garrett, do you really want to face your voters coming up in the next election and say, we had this opportunity to save it and we let it go?
Well, I'll tell you this, when I go back to my district, and my district is made up of a lot of people from Wall Street, but a lot of people, they would describe themselves as from Main Street as well. They are the ones from Main Street, that are really raising the question as to why are we doing this? Why are we bailing out proverbially the same people who brought us the situation we're in right now? Why are we bailing out the people on Wall Street when there are people in their homes who are being pushed out of their homes?
Well,
so
aren't you doing it? Forgive me, aren't you doing it because, as Professor just put it, the house is on fire? If you don't get this one out, God knows what happens next.
Well, that's the question. What does happen next, and what happens next if we take some other plan? For example, the idea was thrown out last week to the Secretary and again today, and we really haven't gotten an answer. And instead of actually putting the taxpayers' dollars on the hook here, what about a guarantee fund instead to establish a mechanism like we would guarantee these MBSs, and they would actually stay in the banks or institutions that are right now? What about some other format like that of setting up a new trading platform so that we can actually keep the government one step removed? Because the government really cannot be in the position of actually owning all these mortgages across the country, and have to hold them, according to Bernanke, maybe for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
There are other plans, other proposals that are on the table now. Why aren't these feasible? For example, taking a stake in the banks instead of using these huge sums of taxpayers' money. Sorry, Professor Eichengreen.
Well, I think it's quite possible that some of these alternatives will prove feasible. So Senator Chris Dodd has a plan that would entail the federal government taking an equity stake in the banks and not bailing out Wall Street, but rather making Wall Street take a hit, take a serious haircut in return for government assistance. I think Congressman Garrett's constituents are quite right to demand that. I also think that can be done.
And give us, we've made this point before, that whilst Washington is wrangling, the markets are falling. If things are not sorted out by Friday, when you break up, as it were, what happens?
I think more dominoes will fall.
And what do you think, Congressman? You think you can get away with it, not sorting this out by Friday?
I think there's a possibility of that, because one thing that Wall Street is looking for is security, in a sense that this issue is being taken care of one way, shape, form, or another. If we were able to come back and say, you know, we are working on this, we're actually having a hearing on it so we can discuss the various options, and we will, in fact, come up with a solution, if not by tomorrow or tomorrow afternoon, by the beginning of next week, we might be able to send the right signals to Washington that we are here and we are addressing it. But we want to do it in a way that one of the points is that we will not necessarily be in the business of picking winners and losers.
Thank you very much, gentlemen both. In a moment, Michael Crick plays Place That Face, but first, a roundup of today's news. Our main story tonight: Gordon Brown has addressed the Labour Party at its conference in Manchester. In a wide-ranging speech, he indicated that he was the man to steer Britain through tough economic times.
In these uncertain times, we must be, we will be, the rock of stability and fairness upon which people can stand.
A gunman has killed 10 people and injured dozens more at a college in Finland. The student, who's been named as 22-year-old Matti Juhani-Saari, then shot himself. He later died in hospital. Police say he was questioned yesterday about a video he'd posted of himself on YouTube, in which he's seen firing a handgun and making threats to kill people. The incident is Finland's second of its kind in less than a year. Iran's President Ahmadinejad has launched a scathing attack on America and warned future presidents of the country not to get involved with affairs overseas. Speaking at the UN, he made oblique reference to the current financial woes of the US and suggested its power was now slipping for good.
American empire in the world is reaching the end of its road, and its next rulers must limit their interference to their own borders.
Well, Mark Urban, our diplomatic editor, is at the UN for us. Give us a little more, Mark. What was the context of these remarks?
Well, President Ahmadinejad's speech was largely theological, one might say. It was a presentation on the theme of how religion, in the way he saw it, had the answers to all the world's problems. But there were one or two sallies, barbed remarks, which showed the depth still of the distrust and dislike of the US, bullying powers, as he called them, and other countries who wish to limit, for example, Iran's nuclear program. There was one particular part of the speech in which he inveighed in pretty toxic language against the influence of what he called the deceitful Zionists over political and financial life in the West, and talked about people, candidates for presidential office, who had gone to seek the approval of these people, as he called it, and said it was deeply disastrous. Now, this, I think, is an interesting tilt at Barack Obama and the speech he made at the conference of the AIPAC pro-Israeli lobbying group Senator McCain was also at that meeting. But I think it's very interesting in the context of course, Mr. Obama being pledged to hold talks with Iran. So in a sense, President Ahmadinejad was getting his retaliation in first, saying already in a sense that he didn't trust Mr. Obama.
And Mark, looking a little bit more widely at the day's events, President Bush met Pakistan's president at a moment when relations are, pretty strained between those countries. What happened there?
Absolutely. Well, with an event like the General Assembly, you get all the world's leaders here, you get the formal speeches, as we heard from the Iranians, but you also get all these activities on the margins, the so-called bilaterals. President Bush's meeting with Ali Asif Zardari, the president of Pakistan, was critical because the two countries need to get on in order to operate in Afghanistan, to counter terrorist threats and all the rest of it. But they've had a very, very bad relationship in recent weeks, with both sides more or less saber-rattling, the Americans saying that they are willing to operate in Pakistan under certain circumstances without the approval of the government, and the Pakistanis saying they're going to stop that. So they were really trying to iron out this problem, and it's a pretty serious problem, I think, between the two governments, before it ends up with troops from one side and the other being involved in actual engagements. And as to what was actually achieved, well, the President said that they would help Pakistan to meet its security needs, but I think we'll see in coming weeks whether they've made any real progress on those very difficult issues.
Mark, thanks very much. Mark Urban at the UN in New York. French energy company EDF is expected to announce a £12 billion offer for the UK's largest nuclear energy producer, British Energy, tomorrow morning. If a takeover does go ahead, it would kick-start the building of a new generation of nuclear reactors in the UK. A woman's been found guilty of murdering her 4-year-old disabled daughter. Joanne Hill from Connors Quay in Flintshire admitted drowning her daughter in the bath. During the trial, the jury heard how Hill had been ashamed of her daughter's condition. She was jailed for life, but is to serve a minimum term of 15 years. As we saw earlier, another poor day for the markets. FTSE 100 share index falling 100 points. In New York, a similar pattern, the Dow Jones closing down there more than 160 points. A short while ago, the pound was up slightly against the euro. Against the dollar, though, the pound down a tad. Right now, we take you back to Manchester and Jeremy.
Well, now the moment for all those suffering from the sad absence of Des O'Connor and Carol Vorderman. It's time to play Place That Face. Actually, it's not. You're too late. For the Labour entries, at least, Michael Crick is the man with the fairground manner and the implausible suit. If you've forgotten what it's all about, and who can blame you, here he is to explain.
Well, from Clement Attlee to Gordon Brown, the Labour Party has had 9 leaders since 1945. Now, before we came to Manchester, we asked 39 academics from the Political Studies Association to give us their rankings. And they decided that Gordon Brown came 8th out of the 9, and top was Clement Attlee, followed by Tony Blair and Harold Wilson. But what do ordinary Labour Party activists think? Today, we asked them to play Place That Face. Would you like to play Place That Face? Would you like to come and do our leaders poll? I'm very late, I'm afraid.
Number 1, Gordon Brown.
Why's that?
Going to take us to a historic 4th term.
I think I might be utterly predictable.
Why have you chosen him?
Because he's the boss.
Well, it's not fair to include Gordon because he hasn't finished his term yet.
Well, who do you think was the greatest Labour leader since the war?
Oh, no, I'm definitely not getting involved in that.
You're going to ruin my career overnight. An invidious task that I happily will leave.
You must have a view on it.
That must be joking. Think I'm falling for that?
It's a quick trick.
I think that that will be one for posterity.
I think that they'd question that Clement Attlee comes first.
He gave us the NHS.
Unassuming, quiet fella, but actually made a big, big difference.
Health service, schools, unbelievable. Blair, first 3 terms, changed the face of British politics.
Because he was the boss.
I'm not taking part in this BBC loving with Cameron.
Loving with Cameron, he's not on the list.
No, but that's what it's all about. Well, I think they're all great.
They're all men.
They are, yes. There's not much we can do about that.
Superb stewardship of the British economy, and his job's not finished yet. Courage, electoral success, social reform, and a huge loss to the Labour movement.
I'm just doing a BBC interview now, I'm afraid, so
Okay, thanks. Well, 3, it's difficult because I'm torn between Kinnock and Gateskill. I'm going to surprise you, Mike. I'm going to put Michael Foot. He is a man of enormous integrity. He's a wonderful parliamentarian. He's stood up for tremendous causes.
Oh, and now I'm struggling because I really want a woman. Where's Barbara Castle? You know, just tell me.
She was Labour leader.
Well, she should have been, shouldn't she? She should have been.
Gordon's the best. There you are. That's plenty.
Also today, we got more than 100 Labour activists here to give us their opinion. As a result, Attlee came top of the poll, followed by Tony Blair, and third, Gordon Brown, doing rather better than he did amongst the academics. Down at the bottom, Jim Callaghan, and finally last, Michael Foot. Next week, we'll be doing the Conservatives, from Churchill to Cameron.
So there's no need to feel deprived at home. You too can Place That Face online. You have to visit bbc.co.uk/Newsnight to watch our specially recorded mini debates on each of the UK's post-war prime ministers and then rank them in order of greatness. We'll be announcing the results next week after the Conservative Party conference. Bet you can't wait. Now, tomorrow morning's front pages, you'll not be surprised to know that almost all of them lead with Gordon Brown's speech. The Daily Telegraph, Brown, no time for a novice. This is no time for a novice. It's also the front page of The Independent and a picture of Sarah Brown. Brown digs in with attack on the novices in waiting on the Times. The Daily Mirror, Gordon's wife line. The Sun, Gordon gets the kiss of wife. And Kiss of Life is the front page of the Daily Mail, and Brown's Fairer Britain, What a Joke, is the front page of the Daily Express. Well, now, what are we to make then of Gordon Brown's speech and the Labour conference and indeed Gordon Brown's leadership of the party? We're joined now by Fraser Nelson of The Spectator and Andrew Rawnsley of The Observer. What do you guys think of the speech?
Well, I thought it was a much better speech than he delivered last year. It had some argument. I thought it sagged a bit in the middle. But it was a better constructed speech, and it obviously had this rather vicious line about no time for novices and apprentices, i.e. you need me. Very obviously an attack not just on David Cameron and George Osborne, but also on David Miliband, the Foreign Secretary.
Obvious
and the primary
to you.
pretender. No, I think obvious. It didn't even need to be spun by Mr. Brown's henchmen. That line was so obviously a swipe at the Foreign Secretary along the way. But I find afterwards, talking to cabinet ministers, that those cabinet ministers who've basically given up on Gordon Brown haven't really changed their view, and those who think he may still have it in him to turn things around haven't changed their view either. So it hasn't fundamentally changed anything.
I'm afraid I was pretty underwhelmed. I'm pretty well vaccinated against Brown magic at best of days, but this time, I mean, there were some good things in it. Of course, he took the fight to David Cameron in a way that he hasn't before, but then he has to do it with things that are half-truths, exaggerations, and concocted quotes, actually. In the case of George Osborne, he took an interview which you did with George Osborne last week and twisted it around to
I wonder if that was where that quote came from. But
it was. You wouldn't recognise it. He said, and I quote, but then he proceeded to give a fake quote, which is a staggering thing to do for a Prime Minister in one of the biggest speeches of the year, but that's what it was like. Takes the fight to the Tories, who really minds? And of course, the Labour people on the whole were happy, and this will give them a few more days' survival. I mean, I was speaking to a cabinet member last week saying he'd be gone by the parliamentary term. He'll be here till Christmas now.
Do you reckon, how long is he secure for, Andrew?
I don't think anybody can give you a reasonably decent prediction about that. I mean, there are clearly members of the Labour Party and members of the Cabinet who think that if they don't move soon, then if they wait till next spring, then the Tories will simply gold-plate their poll lead and it will be too late to do anything. But there are others who make the argument, which is a very powerful argument within the Labour Party, that if we change Prime Minister now in the middle of an economic crisis, the voters won't forgive us for doing that. We'll be forced into an early general election, which we're about to lose. And that's why I say I don't think this week will have fundamentally changed anything, in that there's a large number of people who still are really utterly unconvinced that Gordon Brown can win the next election for Labour or even mitigate a terrible loss. But on the other hand, they can't see their way through to a lifeboat into which they can all leap fairly safely.
And there's still the problem of who on earth would take on the job anyway,
well,
if the prognosis is so poor.
There is that as well. And I think David Miliband's speech, there was another speech that was better than the speech he delivered last year, but didn't so absolutely establish establish himself
You were
as
here.
the challenger.
You were here. Did it energise the hall? No, it didn't.
No, I mean, he had problems at the time he spoke and all that. But on this hall, I don't think it's a great place to speak unless you have a great wow video beforehand to build you up. But that said, no, he didn't. He didn't come on. And there are some politicians who've done this. Tony Blair in the past, David Cameron, and take a conference by storm and say, hey, if you really give up on this guy, I'm available. That hasn't happened this week.
Let Paul Little Fraser get a word in there.
Well, it couldn't happen because he gave them all exactly 420 seconds to make their speech for the cabinet members. It was very well stage managed. This room is a temple to Gordon Brown. I mean, if anybody wanted to shine, they'd have a pretty difficult chance. But they didn't. I think the most significant thing to come from this week is nobody went home saying, wow, did you see David Miliband? It was what a silly Heseltine quote Miliband made. So
I saw one, I mean, I'm joking, of course. There was one person who actually was a conference star, and also the one bit of number 10 that is clearly working. It's his wife, Sarah Brand,
she
who everybody loved, and yeah, some would say upstaged her husband. So there might be some people saying, couldn't we swap him for her? But only
Do you
joking.
believe this line that's being put out for number 10 that she only decided last night suddenly to do it?
No, of course not.
These
I mean, she
things-
might have made a final decision, but these sort of things, as you well know, I mean, everybody knows, are debated for months as to whether they're a good idea or not. I mean, it worked for them, I thought.
It was a very weird conference, this, wasn't it?
Yes, because there's sort of two conferences. There's the slightly North Korean one in here, and there's the conference that, which some people say the real conference, going on in the hotel bars, in corridors, where people are talking about what they're really thinking.
Now, what
wanting to
happens
do.
when a party gets to this state of existential uncertainty or self-doubt, or call it what you will? What happens to it?
Well, look at what happened to the Conservatives 4 years ago. Ian Duggan-Smith gave a speech, something like 27 standing ovations, and he was gone 3 weeks later. It goes to show that no matter how theoretically successful the speech is, you can still be history if you
Come on, this was not in the quiet man turning up.
Oh no, it wasn't quite as bad as IDS's excruciating one. The point is that there are two different weather zones here. When he goes back to London, the cabinet are still out to get him because, and as Andrew says, they're not assuaged. They've been spending most of this week telling people what a dreadful man Gordon Brown is and why he has to go. The only question now is whether it's going to be at the Glenrothes by-election or by Christmas or by the Euro elections. So I don't really think that Gordon Brown has done anything more than buy himself a few more weeks, but that's all he's doing right now, doing week by week, month by month survival strategy.
But you know, there's a great anxiety and uncertainty in the party. Yeah. Clearly, you can sense it absolutely everywhere. Yeah. On the other hand, as far as the general public are concerned, I'm not sure I really sense a tremendous enthusiasm for the Conservatives, do you?
No, there isn't, and I think if you get Conservatives in a dark corner, up to and including their most senior leadership, they would say it is true to this point that they are losing, i.e. Labour are losing more than we're winning. There is no great enthusiastic clamour for the Conservatives, although you look at the polling, the other parties are fooling themselves that it's all shallow and flaky, because it isn't. But no, I mean, I don't think it's pre-97 in that sense.
I'm afraid this is certainly true that if you look at the huge opinion poll the Conservatives have got right now, probably about 75% of that is let's just kick Gordon Brown out. But that's actually enough to win the Tories the election. It's not as if it's not fake. I mean, all they need to do is keep Gordon Brown in power, and they're in. And so far, that plan's going pretty well.
Thank you both very much indeed. That's all from Newsnight tonight. We're off to the Conference Hotel to continue tirelessly seeking the truth. We'll be back with the results, if we remember them, in the studio tomorrow. Good night. Well, thank you.
Good evening.